So I mentioned in a video from the other day about how my eldest son Freddie has hypermobility and had some delayed gross motor um, development, um, and how I thought there was there was clearly a link between that and DDH. So I first thought there might have been a problem I say loosely, an issue with Freddie's development when he was maybe 6, 7 months, as he wasn't rolling or anything like that, wasn't interested in rolling. Kept mentioning it to friends, mentioned it to the health visitor a couple of times, and as people do when you have a baby, was just kept being told that all children develop differently, he'll get there, and was sort of told I was being a bit too sensitive about it. I do have quite a lot of friends that all had babies around the same time, and seeing what their babies were doing did make me wonder why Freddie wasn't doing certain things. And then we got through the health visitor 10-month assessment, which is essentially a tick sheet of things that your baby may or may not be doing at 10 months old, and you have to tick yes, no, a little bit sort of thing. And as I went down that list, I almost couldn't tick yes to anything. So that was things like rolling from front to back to front, starting to try and crawl, cruising along a sofa, taking any steps. He wouldn't kneel. So essentially anything that involved him not being stationary, he couldn't do. He also was showing a heavy left-hand preference. He wasn't doing pincer grip or anything like that. So I sent that form off, and because I knew I'd ticked no to basically everything on that form, I followed up myself with the health visitor about a week after I sent it back, because I hadn't heard from them, and they reviewed his assessment sheet whilst I was on the phone to them, and instantly they said that they wanted to refer him to a physio, reassured me that all children do things different, but he wasn't hitting some of the key milestones that they'd expect. We had actually already noticed that we thought he was super flexible, as sometimes when he'd be like lying in his crib, he'd essentially be like trying to roll back on his arm and it wouldn't seem to faze him at all. And just some funny things that he'd done with his legs, like he just looked like he was, I think you call it double jointed. So we went through the NHS referral system, and by this point he was approaching 1 year old, and he still hadn't been assessed properly by anybody. So we decided to go private, and I done a bit of research and I found a local private physiotherapist, and I had her come round, and she essentially just showed me some basic facilitations into how to train Freddie how to do certain things. So we started off with basics like, how to train him to roll, and then once we mastered that, we'd move on. I had already been following lots of people on Instagram and trying things that physiotherapists have said, and I'd reached out to a few people. But it was literally a case of placing him in the position to enable him to do it. So once he was able to roll, then we went to things like kneeling. So we would basically have to lift his legs into the right positions and show him how to do it. Because before then, what we did notice he started to do was bum shuffle. So we didn't do any crawling. He would just shuffle around, initially just in a circle. He'd just go 360 degrees in a circle, and then he started shuffling back and forward. And then when he was just over 1, he rolled for the first time. And then sort of once he got the hang of it, it was better. But it was all about sort of trying to develop his muscle strength, because where he had loose joints, which is what sort of hypermobility is, I think, it takes a lot more effort for the body to stabilise, to enable, standing and crawling. So I think it got to sort of over 1 year old when we finally got our NHS physio appointment. so I started to sort of do both, an NHS appointment and a private appointment, just to give him the best chance. But when we were doing both of them, both the physiotherapists commented on how much he just wasn't interested in doing the movements, and that was half the battle, is he'd got so used to doing things in the way that suited him that he wasn't really interested in learning to do it another way. But both therapists did actually assess him for hip dysplasia. What I know now, I didn't know then. So I remember them making comment about, was his legs the same length? Were the creases on the back of his legs the same? They were doing hip rolling to see if there's any clicking and clunking. And now I know that is what they were looking for. But at the time they were doing that, I had no idea that that could have potentially been an issue, and had it have been diagnosed with him then, being the age he was, he would have gone straight to surgery. So yeah, so we're quite lucky that that wasn't a case. But my thoughts are that we obviously have loose hips sort of situation with both the boys, and Max being breech potentially didn't help the situation, and that's why he's in the situation he's in now. Freddie is now walking. He actually took his first steps only a month or so ago, so just before being 18 months. Independent steps. He was doing cruising a little bit before that, but even that was an eye-opener. Like, we didn't have to do any childproofing for such a long time, whereas people we know were childproofing at like 8, 9, 10 months. So we've had it super easy, but now he's a force to be reckoned with. He literally is tottering around everywhere. He's just getting some pace, so he's starting to do a bit of running a little bit, I guess, and he's great, and he's fine, and he's normal, and there's nothing to worry about. And I'm really hoping that when Max comes out his harness, it's going to be exactly the same. But I feel like even from going through that experience with Freddie, I now know so much. So even if Max does have slight delay, when he comes out the harness, I know what I need to do, what positions to put him in to encourage development and muscle strength and stuff like that. And I will definitely be enlisting a private physio again, depending what the situation is with getting an NHS physio. But yeah, so that's our story. And if anybody else has, you know, a child with hypermobility or other children, it would just be interesting to know how that's worked out. Because had I have known about any of this to start with, I may have been doing things differently, or I'd know what to look out for. But yeah, just sharing some bit more information.